for the weekly luncheon meeting of the City Club of Portland. Live weekly coverage of City Club is made possible in part by TCI and is produced through the facilities of Portland Cable Access. Now we join the City Club for this week's program.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Club. I'm Pete Heuser, your president. Today we're going to hear from Greg Chaille, the director of the Oregon Community Foundation. He's going to talk about community giving, the art of giving back. This is our last program for the summer. As you probably know, we're going to take off the rest of the month of August for the annual summer hiatus. On September 11, we'll begin another year of programs. The fall will be particularly interesting. We've got ballot measures we'll vote on, and we'll have, I think it's 5 weeks of political debates. For those of you who have signed up, don't forget about the City Club West Side Light Rail trip to Hillsborough on August 25th. Unfortunately, all the spots have been taken, but if you're interested in getting on the waiting list, call the club office. Our board host today, appropriately, is Ned Look. Ned is one of the founders of the Oregon Community Foundation and its first director. So we're happy to have him. He's on the board of the City Club this year, and he'll be asking the first question. After Ned's first question, we'll open up questions for City Club members only, please, in the audience. And please try to form a line right behind the mic, maybe while Ned is asking his questions, so we don't have a delay in getting the questioning going. Our program is made possible in part today due to the generous corporate sponsorship by Miller Nash, Wiener Hager and Carlson, Legacy Health Systems, and U.S. Bank. Greg Chaille and his wife Christine moved to Oregon in the early 1980s when she was appointed to a teaching position at the U of O. As we all know, the only economy that was worse than Portland's then in the early 80s was Eugene's. So Greg apparently gave Ned Look a call at the OCF to talk to him about a job, to talk to him about his prior experience in charitable foundations. Ned suggested that Greg stop by the office next time he was in Portland, and the next morning when Ned showed up for work, there was Greg at his doorstep wanting to talk to him about a job. Evidently, Greg talked Ned into a job setting up a filing system, and so he was hired on a temporary capacity doing that. Ned told me that it was just a matter of weeks before he realized that they couldn't get along without Greg. I'm not sure, maybe it was because the filing system was so confused people couldn't find anything unless Greg was there to tell them about it, but maybe there was more to it. At any rate, Greg became president of the Community Foundation in 1987. Since then, the funds under management by the OCF has grown from $40 million to $260 million. Several years ago, Greg was selected by his peers to become a member of the board of the Council on Foundations based in Washington, D.C., and he's active here in assisting other member foundations around the country. So he's involved not only on a statewide level, but also on a national level, assisting foundations. Greg prepared well for his position. With the OCF, he received a degree from UC Berkeley and a master's degree from San Francisco State. He worked at the Hartford Foundation in Connecticut, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, prior to coming to Oregon. Today, Greg Chaille will talk about philanthropy and the arts. He'll specifically tell us about how charitable institutions working with private individuals can provide leadership to ensure the vitality of the arts. He certainly can speak from the perspective of someone who knows. Last year, the OCF donated approximately 20% of its annual giving to the arts. That's $2.6 million, more than any other foundation in the state. Join me in welcoming Greg Chaille to the City Club.
Well, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here to address the topic of philanthropy and the arts, and as your City Club bulletin put it, Who will pay for art? And we'll be taking a 21st century perspective. And I appreciate those of you who came today, otherwise known, I think, as the dog days of summer, when either because of the weather and the heat we want to be outdoors or just because it's beautiful outdoors. So thank you, and I hope we can engage in an interesting discussion about the future funding of arts in our community. I hope to get us all motivated today to do more to strengthen the arts in Oregon. And I don't mean that we should do that just by giving money, although that would be nice. I'd like to see us all become wiser stewards and wiser investors in the wonderful art resources that we already have in Oregon. And I'm optimistic about the future of arts in Oregon. In fact, I'm optimistic about the future of Oregon in general. And why not? This is a great state. And I'm just as leery of an optimist as you are, so we should be careful. Someone once described optimism as a mania of maintaining that everything is right when it is wrong. And someone else said that an optimist is the person who hasn't gotten around to reading the morning papers. In describing myself as an optimist, I rather like the definition of someone who takes a frying pan on a fishing trip. You aren't assured of eating fish, but you're confident in the outcome. And while I can't be sure that the arts in Oregon will be stronger in the future, if we do the right thing, I think we can have confidence in the outcome that the arts will be stronger in Oregon. So today we'll discuss some of the right things that we can do to assure a strong arts community in the future. And by the way, when I use the term arts, I use it as convenient shorthand for cultural and heritage programs in this state, museums and history centers, visual and performing arts. So think expansively when we talk about arts. You know, it's appropriate to have this discussion about the future of arts at the City Club. I can think of few groups like the City Club where the members are so committed to improving our community. And you remind me a lot of the donors of the Oregon Community Foundation, people who also care about improving community. And we can be very proud, as Pete said, about the record of the Oregon Community Foundation. Today, the Oregon Community Foundation is the 17th largest community foundation in the United States, in a state with only 3.2 million. This record speaks well about how Oregonians do care for community. And we'll be celebrating, by the way, our 25th anniversary this coming year, and I encourage you all to come to our annual meeting on November 10th, and perhaps City Club will invite some of our board members and me back to tell the story of the foundation in more detail later in the year. I like to think about the Oregon Community Foundation and all the other civic institutions like the City Club as one of Oregon's best kept and least understood success stories, and that's the story of civic involvement. The success of all the civic institutions that engage Oregonians is not the result of any secret talent or special skill that we have in administering our institutions. No, but it's the success and it's the character of Oregonians that make our institutions successful. And frankly, despite what we too often read and hear about our state, Oregonians do care about our communities, and we care deeply. Given good leadership and good choices, Oregonians are willing to invest personal resources and volunteer time into community programs. Remember that statement. Given good leadership and good choices, Oregonians are willing to invest in their communities. And that's why I'm so optimistic about the future of arts in Oregon. We have great leadership in this state, in our arts community. We have great community spirit, and we have great investment choices. And when you leave this lunch today, I hope you have three things clear in your mind. Private philanthropic support for the arts is essential, but it can and must be used much wiser than it currently is. Second, government support for the arts, while declining at the national level, can and must be increased at the local level, and it too must be used more wisely. And third, neither private or public support will increase or will be used more wisely unless we all take an active role in creating the change. So whatever we come to understand about the opportunities that lie ahead to strengthen support for the arts, they will not be realized unless you think about yourself as one of the many agents for achieving the opportunity. You know as well as I do that there's new thinking in America that's saying that federal programs aren't the solutions to the challenges we face in this country. No, the solutions must come from the local level, from leadership in Minneapolis, in San Diego, in Hartford, in Boston, yes, and here in Oregon's towns and communities as well. Those communities in this country that develop their local leadership will be the most effective in responding to the challenges we face in the next century. Will Oregon be one of those communities? Well, I have no doubt we will, but you too must become involved. So I hope this lunch not only clarifies issues related to arts funding, but I hope it's a wake-up call for us all to become more involved in supporting the arts. But before we talk about the future, let's quickly review the quality and the diversity of arts in Oregon as we know them today. I think by any reasonable measure, we can say that we have a rich and diverse array of arts opportunities in this state. We have the traditional major cultural organizations like the Oregon Symphony, the Portland Art Museum, the High Desert Museum in Bend, the Eugene Ballet, and many others. These nonprofit organizations are very high quality, and if they perform, they bring us world-class talent, or they have world-class talent on their own staffs. If they exhibit, they either bring us world-class exhibits or they have world-class collections here in Oregon. In addition to the majors, we have a wide range of mid to small size cultural organizations that bring us both professional and high-quality amateur opportunities. Here we can count such groups as the Oregon Coast Music Association in Coos Bay, the Portland Center for Contemporary Arts, Teatro Milagro, and the African American Ballet. These smaller groups create access to the arts that the majors cannot. And they are located in smaller communities, and they often provide opportunities for local artists to participate. And if you're an individual artist, well, I think you have here in Oregon high-quality groups to join, galleries to show at, and places to perform where audiences will come. And speaking of audiences, from the consumer standpoint, audience participation is strong in cultural activities in this state. Strong audience participation not only reflects good access to the arts, but strong interest in enjoying diverse arts opportunities. The revenue arts organizations receive today, on average in Oregon, 64% of their revenue comes from audience ticket sales. This is high by national standards, and I think it reflects strong public interest and a product that is being provided that's outstanding. So not only do we have a diverse array of arts opportunities throughout Oregon, many people are taking advantage of these opportunities and in great numbers. And arts opportunities are not only good here in Oregon, but throughout America. A recent report by the Pew Charitable Trust, which is based in Philadelphia, concluded, quote, "Today, high-quality professional arts are far more available than ever before in this country's history. There was a generation-long effort from 1960 to the mid-1990s to build a cultural infrastructure in America, and the results were a huge success." The Pew report notes that theater companies grew in the 30-year period, 1965 to 1995, from 56 to 420. That's over a 600% increase. Orchestras grew from 100 to 230, and dance companies grew from 37 to over 400. The effort was led by a few national foundations and the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities, and their effort was aimed at assuring broad public access to the arts throughout the country. But despite this positive picture we can paint about the arts here in Oregon and in America, there are storm clouds on the horizon. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, I think the rain and the wind have already begun. and we need to be very concerned. First, federal funding for the arts has declined significantly in recent years. Government's largest supporter of the arts, the NEA, has all but eliminated support for individual artists. And the NEA's budget has declined from $170 million a few years ago to about $100 million today, and that's a 45% decline. Here in Oregon, the Oregon Arts Commission's budget has, while not declining, remained flat for years. Oregon's state expenditure on the arts ranks 45th today out of the 50 states, and it's been consistently in that category. While private support for the arts has been increasing at about 6% per level, so we're seeing an increase there, it tends to be concentrated in supporting the major organizations, and also is directed into special projects and facility improvements. And with declining support from the federal government and relatively flat local support, both from the public and private sectors, arts organizations of all sizes are feeling budget pressures from rising operating costs. As I said earlier, arts organizations are doing a fine job of maximizing their earned revenues. In fact, they're doing about the best job they can. It's in the areas of private donations and government support that pressures are arising. And what's the consequence of this budget pressure? Well, it's not good for our communities. In the last few years, we have lost organizations like Storefront Theater, West Coast Chamber Orchestra, Portland Repertory Theater, Portland Civic Theater, Pacific Northwest Museum of Natural History down in Ashland, and several others to the consequence of tight financial margins. And others are in growing trouble. In the last 6 years, the combined deficits of Portland's the metro region's 15 largest arts organizations, the combined deficits of those 15 largest arts organizations grew by 110%, and they now total an astronomical $5 million. With arts organizations already in tight situations, to be carrying deficits at this level is frankly scary. So while we clearly have a rich and diverse array of arts organizations in this state, and lots of opportunities for audiences to attend, what we're facing is really a very severe growing crisis. The future does not look bright because the major source of support for individual artists, writers, poets, musicians, and others, the NEA, has dried up. Who will support innovation, creativity, risk, deviations from the norm? The future does not look bright because public support is declining and arts organizations are doing the best job they can of maximizing their earned revenues. The future does not look bright because many arts organizations are finding that while they can attract grants and donations for new exhibits, building improvements, and special projects, basic operating support to supplement ticket sales is the problem. So what do we do? Do we accept the fact that federal fellowships for artists no longer exist? I think not. And I don't think you do either. I don't think we will stand idly by and watch as arts organizations falter. So let's talk about the future and my optimism. I think we can look forward to a strong future if we take a few planned steps. First, to the private sector. I'm very proud that the philanthropic sector, and that includes individuals, corporations, and foundations, contributes over $11 billion to arts programs in this country. That's $11 billion. That figure dwarfs the government's combined investment of just $1 billion. So you can see philanthropy is a major player. Here in Oregon, we know that foundation giving to the arts totals about $10 million. But those who seek private grants all too often comment that they are restricted to facility improvements and special projects. Core operating support is hard to get. This private sector likes to support something special. Paying light bills, the janitor, the sound man, that's not very sexy. As to its role, the private sector must look at creating new and stable sources of revenue for our arts organizations. And here is what we can do to create those new, stable revenue sources. We can work with Oregon's arts groups to build professionally managed endowments. Endowments supported by many people provide the basic operating support to keep art groups afloat. Endowments are like savings accounts for you and me, and when they get large enough, they provide a predictable and steady flow of funds that's like music from heaven for the arts administrator and to the chair of the fundraising committee. The sad fact is that most arts organizations have no endowments whatsoever to speak of. Shakespeare in Ashland, the Oregon Symphony, the Portland Art Museum, a few others, that may be it. At the Oregon Community Foundation, we're privileged to administer one of the state's premier endowments. It's called the Oregon Arts Heritage Endowment, which is now $15 million in size. This endowment provides general support revenue of $250,000 annually to each of the Oregon Symphony, the Portland Art Museum, and the Portland Opera, $250,000 annually. The endowment was established 15 years ago by some visionary individuals in this community. We need to actively establish more endowments for our arts organizations, and this will take leadership. Just last month, some of you are aware, OMSI received a $3.3 million challenge grant from the Oregon Community Foundation's Christine and Fred Schweigert Jr. Fund. OMSI must raise $1 for each $2 the Schweigert Fund gives. If they succeed, OMSI will have a $5 million endowment fund, which is dedicated to supporting building maintenance and special exhibits. The Schweigert Endowment will be a new lifeline of vital support for one of our most cherished Oregon institutions. And do you believe that this is the first endowment of any significance for OMSI after 50 years of operation? I have the vision that someday there will not just be a handful of arts endowments in Oregon, but literally hundreds. And why not? We certainly have tremendous wealth in this state that can not only seed these endowments, as the Schweigerts have, but they can build endowments well into the future. With strong endowments, we can have stable arts organizations. And endowments are not just possibilities for the larger institutions, as we may think. Today, the Oregon Community Foundation administers endowments for a variety of smaller groups, like the Coos Art Museum, the Sitka Center for the Arts, the Cottage Theater in Cottage Grove, and the Brit Festivals in Jacksonville. And that's just a partial list. Smaller organizations with committed supporters can build endowments too. Endowments are wonderful ways to channel local wealth back into the local community. At the foundation, we like to say that endowments are Oregon's renewable resource. In addition to helping to develop endowments, the private sector can support management programs that will help arts administrators run their organizations in the best way they can. We want our arts organizations to be run like the best businesses in the state and to have the best expertise to handle the complex issues that face them in the future. In Oregon, the Business Committee for the Arts and the Regional Arts and Cultural Council here in Portland are on the verge of creating a comprehensive program to help arts organizations become outstanding business managers. There is hope that the governor and the legislature will join hands with the Business Committee for the Arts, the Oregon Arts Commission, and the Regional Arts and Cultural Council to create a program that not only develops the highest level of management assistance for arts organizations, but that can also be used to seed new endowments and create cash reserve funds for our arts organizations. Seed or challenge grant funding from the state could stimulate and unleash a huge private sector investment in the arts. In addition to stimulating endowments and strengthening arts management, we can and must do more to support individual artists. We can't sit back and watch as the NEA pulls back. In Oregon, we already have some of the nation's most creative fellowship and artist awards programs, and they are funded entirely by private donations. The one I'm most familiar with is the Bonnie Bronson Fellowship. Endowed at $250,000 from a large number of smaller donations from individuals, many of them artists, the Bonnie Bronson Fellowship provides an annual cash award of $2,500 to a female artist from the Northwest. It's in memory of Bonnie Bronson, who died climbing Mount Adams in 1989. To receive this fellowship is wonderful recognition as well as needed financial support for an individual artist. We must create more private fellowships and awards programs for artists, and we can do that locally. But let me tell you, to stimulate the growth of new endowments, to support management assistance, to create fellowships for individual artists, we can't do that without increasing private giving. And it's at this point in my remarks, to clue you in, that you should begin to squirm in your chairs. We need to give more not only to the arts, but to education and other areas as well. Currently, Oregon ranks 40th in the nation out of 50 states in private giving. We have tremendous opportunities to increase individual giving in this community. And as I said, I think Oregonians, when given good leadership and good choices, will invest. The Community Foundation's Giving in Oregon Council, which is a broad-based council of philanthropists and corporations, would like to see this state's giving ability at least equal our income ranking. We rank 25th in the nation in terms of adjusted gross income, yet we rank 40th in the nation in terms of individual giving. We have a huge opportunity here, as I say, to benefit the arts and other vital areas. And I'm pleased that two members of the council, Ken Lewis and Sally McCracken, who chairs the Giving in Oregon Council, are both here. We're working very diligently to increase giving, and you need to join us. So, enough about the private sector. What about government's role? Despite the poor trends at the national level, all is not bad. At the Portland City Council, we're seeing strong leadership in arts funding. On April 29th this year, the Portland City Council exercised special leadership and made a $1 million investment into the Regional Arts and Cultural Council for the Art Stabilization Program. To secure the funds, $4 must be raised for each dollar given. That's good leverage and will produce $5 million to assist arts organizations become more effective administrators and to become more stable with cash flow issues. Also in April, the city increased its general fund allocation by 25% to $1.25 million, and that's great leadership and no doubt the result of years of work by citizens to get the city to focus more on the arts. Other trends at the local level are good as well. The Portland Center for Performing Arts now receives $1.6 million through the regional hotel and motel tax and from a city grant to be used to make performance space affordable to arts groups. 3 years ago, the rent at the Performing Arts Center was 3 times the national average, and it was causing severe problems. So local trends are good, but much more can be done, and here are some ideas for the public sector. First, just as we provide parks for all to enjoy, the government sector must make sure that quality facilities are available for all to use at an affordable price. This is critical. Local general fund investment in performance facilities by regional governments is below the national average significantly. We need to increase this investment. Second, government can assure quality of funding for diverse arts groups. The President's Council for the Arts, for example, has found that while private support is strong, it tends to focus on the major institutions. Government can assure those who do not have access to private donors because of cultural or socioeconomic barriers are not left out. And we've got good examples of that here at the city. And lastly, I believe the government's ability to step in and to help guide the complex mix of private and public funding is critical. Who's going to provide the leadership to get us all to work together? In other words, government must provide strong leadership and advocacy for the arts. All citizens benefit from the arts, and all citizens have a stake in its services. In Portland today, we have a strong local arts leadership group in the Regional Arts and Cultural Council, and it's developed a blueprint for the future known as Arts Plan 2000. And now the Oregon Arts Commission at the state level is stepping forward with strong leadership and is working closely with the governor and a citizens task force to engage new Oregonians in the discussion about the future of arts and their funding in this state. And as we look to the future, what's your role as a private citizen? Well, I think there are 3 things that are important for you to do. First, become informed of the issues. Don't go on past assumptions. Times have changed significantly in how we support our arts. Second, give more. The average Oregonian contributes only $2,100 a year to nonprofit organizations. The average is $2,500. That's $400 more. We can improve our giving significantly to the arts as well as to other causes. And when you give more wisely and consider giving to basic operating support and perhaps a deferred gift to an endowment. And remember, when you buy a ticket, you only help with a portion of the operating costs. You're paying your way. Buy the ticket and make a charitable contribution on top of it. And lastly, become an advocate. We all need to become more aware and I think more vocal about how much we appreciate and we enjoy the arts. And as I close, I'm sure you noticed that I did not once comment about why I think the arts are important. Many would begin their remarks from that perspective. But for me, the arts are like having clean water and blue skies. They're like having children playing in parks or books to read. They stimulate the mind and inspire the soul. They make us feel good about the place we live. And they bring us together as citizens in common experiences. And they give youth hope. We can be sure of that. We have such a rich and diverse array of arts opportunities here in Oregon, and I believe that we all take them for granted. But if you continue to do that, if we continue to do that, we may lose much of what we have. Don't let that happen. Become an art advocate and an art supporter. Thank you very much.
I'm not as young as Greg. Greg, in talking about the need to increase individual giving in our state, many of us have been concerned about the level of giving by the business community. For example, our chamber has a program recognizing companies that give 1% or more of pre-tax profits to our community. In Minneapolis, the chamber has a program honoring business that give 5% or more to charities. There are 147 members so honored, compared to our program with just over 100 members at the 1% level. Shouldn't we be able to expect more from our business community?
Well, the Minnesota program is an outstanding model of recognition for corporate contributions, and it's a long-standing one, too. The Dayton-Hudson Company founded it, Old Man Dayton, as we like to say, in the 20s, the 5% Club. The Portland Chamber of Commerce a few years ago started something called the Business Giving Alliance, and initially it started with a 5% grouping, and I think a 3% and a 1%. And what they found is that the majority of companies that joined were in the 1% level, and it looked bad to have some who were in the 1% level and not the 5% level. And I think the strategy, Ned, was clearly to, here in Portland, to develop enough of a group at the 1% level and build over time towards the 5% level. I think there's no question that we should encourage corporations to give at least 5% of pre-tax profits to the community, and the Chamber can provide a lot of leadership on this. I think the time is right for them to reconsider their adjustments. In Minneapolis, what they do, and we encourage this through our Giving in Oregon Council, is to celebrate philanthropy, and the 5% Club is a way to celebrate philanthropy in the community and bring recognition to companies. And what they're doing in Minnesota is that the group that's in the 2% level are being mentored by that 5% group and encouraged to come along, and they're seeing members who are at the 2% level step up and give 3%, 4%, and then ultimately 5%, and without putting pressure on them. Yes, I think there's need for more leadership in terms of corporate philanthropy. A few companies in this community are doing an outstanding job in providing more leadership. PGE is, I think, providing outstanding leadership to create more discussion at the corporate level about giving back to community. Companies, as we know, can give up to 10% of their pre-tax profits and claim a charitable deduction. And so the 5% is really only going halfway to what you could do.
My name is Ed Marks, and I'm a City Club member, and I enjoyed your talk. You gave me a lot to think about. But my question has to do with your comments that government funding can be spent more wisely. You made that comment both about state funding and federal government funding, but you didn't elaborate on it. I would be very interested to hear you elaborate on that for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the wisest thing the state can do is begin to work more closely with the private sector on creating stable revenue flows for arts organizations. And that would include such things as matching grants for private donations. In Arizona, what we're seeing is the state has committed matching funds for endowments for arts organizations, and there's a huge growth right now, maybe not huge, but there is a dramatic growth in endowments for arts organizations because of some state money on the table to match private donations. I think what we've seen is that I hear the criticism of public funding that it's gone more towards program grants, just like the private sector has done. And so arts organizations are continuing to have to think of creative projects to get public funding, and that the state needs to work with the private sector more effectively at looking at stable revenue sources. The art stabilization program I mentioned, the fact that the city of Portland put $1 million into that is, I think, a very wise move of not funding special projects, but putting money to assist with stabilization of organizations. And by stabilization, we're talking about not only board and management assistance, but giving them some funds to put into cash reserves if they achieve certain benchmarks, operating benchmarks. And so that the arts organizations aren't continually on a fast treadmill of trying to seek that next grant, but they're really building some stability over time. That would be the first thing I would say that they need to do more wisely. I think the other thing too is in terms of facility subsidies. If you look across the region, I think we find that it's a real patchwork in terms of which communities do have access to good facilities and which don't. And I think that that hinders effective arts, and we'd like to see government invest more in facilities. And when we say government, we don't just mean the state and Portland. We often think of that. Down in Eugene, I think we're seeing some crisis at the Holt Center for the Performing Arts because of lack of public funding, and it's creating some real crises, and some of the local arts groups are having to pay increasing costs for using the Holt Center. And that's, I think, for lack of a good investment into the Holt Center, we're going to pay for it later with ineffective arts organizations financially. That'd be the main thing, facilities, and then working closely with the private sector around stabilization efforts.
Dan Ryan, City Club member. I too appreciate your remarks, especially the part about giving to operating funds. My question is more about the audience. I'm impressed with your knowledge of the entire state, understanding the Medford areas, the Central Oregons throughout the state, which a lot of us don't get a chance to do with our charges. And so I think, like many people in this audience, it was a real easy speech to follow because we're there for the most part. Our attitudes, beliefs, and values are with you. So my question is I'm hoping a part of your charge is to take this pulpit elsewhere so we can keep shifting that attitude around the state. And is that in your plan for this coming year?
No. Well, I appreciate being asked to speak to the City Club because always you're on the spot and you have to do a lot of research. And doing a lot of research for this presentation, I learned a lot about, through my friends in the arts community, about what the real issues are. And here I am, a fairly informed person who learned a lot about issues such as operating support. I mean, I hear that, but I really got to see the numbers in preparing for this speech. I think I would agree with you that we need to get this kind of message out more, whether it's me or someone else. I think what's happening at the state level truly does impress me, that the governor is stepping forward more for the arts, and I'm encouraged by the leadership at the Oregon Arts Commission, who's going to ask the next question, about working with local communities and engaging elected officials in Medford, Burns, and all the other communities to think about arts funding. I'd be happy to give this presentation in other communities too, and I think we were talking, Pete and I, before the presentation, about the importance of engaging in smaller group discussions on these issues, because you know, you can hear a speech and you retain only a little bit of it, and I think it would be useful for citizens to engage in a dialogue specific to their community.
Leslie Toomey, I'm co-chair of City Club's Arts and Culture Committee. Greg, one area you haven't touched on is the potential for funding from foundations outside of Oregon to Oregon arts and cultural organizations. I think that perhaps Oregon Community Foundation recently had a role in convening some foundations in the healthcare funding field, and I'm wondering if you see any role for Oregon Community Foundation, or how you could help arts and cultural organizations make those crucial contacts with outside foundations.
We always feel that local foundations should play a leadership role in attracting more national dollars to Oregon. We feel that we're off the beaten path, and that we're very fortunate when we do get national foundation grants in Oregon, because those national foundations have really tried to work locally with the community. I think that we'd be happy to do that. I think the key there is for the arts community to approach us with some good ideas that would cause us to have a reason to convene. I think that some organizations are able to get, the Art Museum I know is now pursuing several national grants for its big facility improvement project. By the way, the Art Museum, it's doing a $30 million campaign, and it's been very successful so far. They've dedicated that roughly 45% of the money they secure is going to be put into endowment, which is, I think, approximately, well, $14 million is dedicated for endowment. I think it's a really wise move on their part. But I think that's a good idea, and we'd be happy to explore that with arts organizations. I think one of the points I was trying to make in my presentation is that if we're going to push for endowments, we need to do that in partnership with arts organizations as well. Have a convening discussion about how to build endowment and all work together, the public sector, the foundation community, and arts organizations, rather than doing that independent of the arts organizations themselves.
I'm Rosalie Tank, co-chair with Leslie of the Arts and Culture Committee, and I'm also a board member of Artist Repertory Theater. And my question was going to relate to the great practice of giving toward projects like education and children at risk, but since you've covered that, I'm switching gears and asking an endowment question. Artist Repertory Theater is looking to begin an endowment. We are 16 years old and financially stable, but what we're running up against is the public perception that arts organizations are so unstable and they may not be here tomorrow, and that it would be very difficult to create an endowment for a mid-sized organization like ART.
Well, one reason that a lot of arts groups and other nonprofits have worked to create endowments in cooperation with the Oregon Community Foundation is that the endowment will always be there if the arts organization goes out of business. And so we have a fund called the Portland Civic Theater Fund, and the Civic Theater no longer exists, but that fund is being used constructively to support activities consistent with the goals of an advisory board. And the other endowments that we maintain, if the organizations are to go out of business, then their integrity would remain and can remain, and they would continue to be used to support theater in Coos Bay or music in Bend, even though the XYZ organization is no longer there. So it gives donors the assurance that there's going to be this integrity to the endowment, despite the the comings and goings of perhaps other organizations. With the Oregon Arts Heritage Endowment Fund, which is dedicated to the Symphony, the Opera, and the Art Museum, if any one of those three organizations is to go out of business, and when it was created, there were questions about that in the mid-'80s, actually, if all three could continue, then we were to take that share and apply it to the other two remaining ones, and if a new XYZ organization comes back into business in the future, then it would continue to get, or it would get that 1/3 share back to it, so that donors had assurance that the money wouldn't be used to pay the back rent that has been owed for 3 years or something.
Dick Lewis, City Club member. Thanks, Greg, for taking the time to prepare a talk and come and give it. I'm grateful to you for that. I want to go back to a point that Ned raised about the 5% idea of corporate giving and of corporate giving. It occurs to me, and this is based upon a comment I heard at another presentation a few weeks ago, which made the point that corporate giving increasingly is being handled through its marketing division and less through a spirit of open philanthropy. And I feel concerned about the extent to which marketing concerns will dominate the corporate interest in philanthropy, so that you could increase the amount of corporate giving and maybe even reach a 5% level. But if it's going to support organizations based on marketing concerns, then I think it might still leave out a lot of the smaller organizations that are doing very good and important local arts work, but which can't satisfy the marketing interests of corporations. I appreciate your comments on that.
Well, I think that's a very important concern that you've got. First of all, when we talk about business giving in Oregon, most business giving occurs from family-owned businesses and smaller businesses, closely held corporations, and others that really have their roots historically in our communities. Our Giving in Oregon report finds that what drives private giving from the business sector in the state are smaller businesses. So we're very pleased that places in La Grande and Burns and other communities, and here in Portland, where there is local ownership, local control, are very active in giving. I think you're concerned with cause-related marketing, and tying the grant-making to the marketing effort applies more to the larger corporations that we see, national, international corporations. I don't like that trend. There's something called strategic philanthropy, a lot of discussion. I've given presentations on that, and there's two forms of strategic philanthropy, good and bad. Good strategic philanthropy is like what U.S. Bank did when it made a major commitment to self-enhancement in Portland. It said, we want to do something positive for our community. We make $1 million investment. We're going to help them raise other monies and really sink our teeth into this inner city youth program. Wonderful alliance between an organization and a bank, and it worked out well for them both. I think other kinds of strategic philanthropy are driven not with a sense of community goals in mind, or how do we improve the community. It's more just from a marketing standpoint, and we want to discourage that as much as we can, I think. It helps with the finances of arts organizations, but I don't think it's good in the long run for how corporations make decisions about what to support and what not to support. Where are the decisions being made? Are they being made in the boardroom based on need and fact in terms of what's in the community's best interest, or are they being based in the marketing department's offices based on what's going to get our name out as a corporation the most effective way? That's all I have to say on that.
Greg, Bill Bulick, Regional Arts and Culture Council, City Club member. A question for you and actually everyone in this room. As you may know, Greg, our Arts Council is bucking the trend of less public funding for individual artists. We've increased our project grant funding, and we are going to set aside a minimum of $20,000 per year from this year forward for individual artist fellowships. And I'm wondering what prospects you would see for that being a seed to attract private funding from foundations, corporations, and individuals, to grow that into a much larger pool of funding that could provide these vital individual artist fellowships and perhaps Community Foundation would be willing to play a role.
What do you think, Grant staff? Well, I was going to mention that, by the way. I had to exit for time. But the Regional Arts and Cultural Council has set aside $20,000 for individual artist awards, and I think that's great to see that. Congratulations. Thanks for doing that. I think the key would be private donor recognition. When I, as a citizen, give to a governmental entity, am I going to be recognized, or do I feel like it's just more of my tax money coming to you? I think people like to support individual fellowships and awards because they're very personalized ways of giving. The Oregon Book Awards, for example, I think has several endowments in it where people, Edna Holmes, for example, gives an award annually for children's literature. And that's the Edna Holmes Award. So it's very personalized. And I think if you can figure out, Bill, a way to allow for that personalization of it, I think that's a good idea. And maybe the Arts and Cultural Council doesn't need to manage the money. It could be put into a neutral place and have an advisory group that would administer it. Those are the top of the head comments. And I think that is a question for everyone here to think about and maybe to plan for. Thanks. Thanks for all your help on this speech, by the way.
John Leeper, City Club member. Because I don't see anybody behind me, I'll ask two, if I may. Questions, that is. Are you aware of any organizations with a strategy to increase the National Endowment for the Art funding? And what can individual citizens do in that regard? Secondly, in that there seems to be an increasing number of 7, 8, and 9-figure foundations, are you satisfied with their contribution to the arts? And if not, what can be done to joust them?
Regarding the NEA, I'm sure that there are lots of groups that are concerned in lobbying. Frankly, I read what happens with the NEA in the newspapers like you do. I take very seriously my comment that leadership for the future has to come from the local level. And there's a growing feeling that the NEA is an insignificant player in this. If we continue to worry about the NEA's role, we're just wasting time. I think the obvious answer is that you have to make your own personal decision in the voting booth about who you elect, who goes back to Congress and represents your interests, and that has to be a decision that's made by all of us individually. I think that Oregon here, the issues of the NEA are being decided not necessarily by Oregon representatives. So we may not have a great influence in how those decisions ultimately are made in terms of funding of the NEA. So my point is, let's not waste our time. Let's get going. And I think we can do a lot of things to get going. As I said, regarding national foundations that may have huge amounts of money, I think that they are challenged by how to use that money, and they're being challenged by to put it into education, into healthcare, into other areas as equally deserving as the arts. And so I'm not an advocate that they should choose, nor should the Oregon Community Foundation choose to fund the arts over some other area. They should get their fair share, and the investment should be wise. I think we're fortunate in Oregon to see growing endowments. The Ford Family Foundation, and we have one of their trustees here, Sally McCracken, is got real opportunities to invest, and I think is showing an interest in investing in arts and education and other areas. So I think the prospect locally is positive to seeing increased private investment in the arts. Those are good questions.
Tom Deering, a City Club member. I'm also the chair of the board of Pacific Northwest College of Art, which is a major art institution, I think, in the city, and combined some of the things that you've been talking about. It's an educational institution. It also supports 50 artists who are either full or part-time faculty. Also provides a supply of people coming into the community. And in part, my question is, how can we, now that we've not been a part of the Portland Art Museum for 4 years and have just moved into a new facility, how can we avoid being overlooked, as we sort of were in connection with your remarks, as being an institution that does have a major part in the art scene in Oregon. We're really struggling with the idea with how to emerge and how to raise our profile. And are there things that we ought to be doing that we're not doing that would help us accomplish that?
Thanks, Tom. Tom's one of the supporters, I think, of the Bonnie Bronson Fellowship, by the way. Well, you invited me to lunch to show me around on your new facility, and then you didn't show up, I think. But a few others did. I think what you're doing is pretty good in terms of networking, getting the word out that way. I agree. I learned a lot, by the way, of visiting the college that I didn't know about what you were doing. What a great resource you are. And I think that is a big challenge that you face. Somebody is going to have to help you fund a marketing effort. And is often the case. Students outside of Oregon know about you better than students inside of Oregon as opportunity for education. I think some foundations are interested in institutional development grants, and maybe some donors are as well, of getting some support to assist you with moving from a certain level of development to a higher level of development, and that, I think the specifics of that I couldn't comment on. But I think individual networking that you're doing is really very important at your new facility.
Harriet Watson, City Club board member. I'd suggest that we in Portland and in Oregon are blessed by the kinds of contributions made to the life of the community through the arts on an ongoing basis from our colleges, universities, independent schools, Jefferson dancers from our public sector. What role do you see those institutions playing in the kind of art mix that you've described? And I gathered that it wasn't a sector that I heard you make reference to.
That's a really good point. It's not a sector actually that I thought about, although I'm well aware of it. And I think we may take that for granted. Of course, some of the dance opportunities at Portland State and through the Portland Public Schools have been eliminated. And I think that they are critical. Theater opportunities through the local colleges, University of Oregon School of Music, which created the Oregon Bach Festival, and it's one of the outstanding international festivals related to music. That connection between those institutions and communities is very important, and I think it needs to be explored and understood better. And I am not aware of how viable it is right now. I mean, is it at risk? Have we lost much? Excellent question. I think we should assign our Arts Commission to study that.
Ken Lewis, City Club member. Greg, you alluded before to the fact that Oregon is low in giving but higher in income than we give.
I said it. I didn't allude to it.
Okay, you said that. And the question I'd like to ask you to answer, because this is another forum for you to give some more facts, is at what levels are Oregonians deficient compared to the others? At what income levels? It's my understanding that lower income levels were equal to other states, but I think it's important to state at what income levels we're deficient.
Okay. Well, you alluded to something. Oregonians trail, we find our study, Giving in Oregon, finds that it's Oregonians who make $50,000 and over who trail their peers from other states. And that the Oregonian who makes 50 and below is actually giving at comparable levels to peers in other states, from states with similar adjusted gross incomes. In particular, we see the lag occur dramatically at over 100,000 and then particularly over 200,000. And so what Ken is talking about is a real opportunity and a real need when we move towards increasing giving to do it at those higher income levels. And our feeling about the history of giving in Oregon is not one where we feel Oregonians are stingy. We feel we're just at the edge of creating a stronger culture of giving. There's a lot of factors that influence giving. One is the number of charitable institutions. Another is how effective are they making their case to the community. And we think with the right kind of approach, given good things to invest in and good leadership, we can increase giving. I think the Symphony and the Art Museum and a few other institutions are leading the way in this regard. Thank you.
Question on that answer.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Make a comment if you'd like.
right now?
Go ahead.
It seems to me, Greg, and Greg and I have discussed this, that we ought to consider an arts tax in the state, or an arts and cultural tax. And since we're deficient in the